Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Progress America Unfiltered. This is Rhett Martino here with Craig Johnson and Linda Benesh to talk about what is going on in Silicon Valley with Silicon Valley Bank and to talk a little bit about the perpetrators behind it, including Kyrsten Sinema, because yes, all roads lead to Sinema and all roads from Sinema lead, I guess, directly to these big financial institutions that she just has her hands in and they have her hands in with her as well. And it just seems like one big web of deceit that the American people are continuously paying for, be it financially or, of course, in the cost of everyday life and the cost of productivity, meeting the needs of the American people. Kyrsten Sinema just seems to be the great interventionist in all of those things. So I'm going to pass it over to Craig Johnson, who is going to give us kind of the rundown on what is going on with Silicon Valley Bank. We've heard all about it in the news this week, but I think it's still kind of this amorphous thing. Craig, what does it mean?
It means a whole lot and a whole little all at the same time, honestly. So Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank and some of these other banks that people may have heard of that are in danger. What has happened is essentially an old school bank run. That is what has started it all. So there was a party in Montana in which everybody was skiing, and a bunch of VC firms who have invested in a bunch of startups, who most of Silicon Valley and a bunch of healthcare firms, over half of them put their money here. And at this Montana retreat, all of their advisors advised them to withdraw their money all at the same time. This, combined with many financial pressures the bank was already facing because of the kind of way that they invested the money that they were getting, because they had huge deposits but no way to make money because they're not a commercial bank, and so they're not doing the normal consumer lending profit cycle there. They invested in treasury bonds. And treasury bonds, when they bought them in 2019, 2020, 2021, were very cheap and were a safe, moderate way to basically store cash while still making a slight profit. And that's what they did. But that didn't stay the same, as we all know. Everybody here has been aware of the inflation problem and thus the Fed's reaction to that inflation problem and raising the interest rates. And as you raise the interest rates on treasury bonds, which were previously 1.9%, they're now 6%, banks are forced to take a loss on selling them. So basically, when everybody took out their money out of this bank and the bank couldn't compensate by selling their capital that they had used because the interest rate was so much higher and the secondary market in which you could sell those bonds had basically evaporated because no one wants a 1.9% treasury bond when you can go to the government and buy a 6% interest treasury bond, they ran out of cash. And so basically what happened is, over the weekend, the Biden administration, along with the FDIC and the Fed, have decided to do a couple things. They have decided that they are going to not limit the federal insurance for deposits in banks, which everybody has access to, me, you, the moon, basically, up to $250,000. They've erased that limit. So they're basically making whole all of the depositors' deposits. And this is a really big deal because this specialty bank that was wholly devoted towards Silicon Valley tech startups was the payment processor for many companies. And so if they didn't have that capital and the access to their money, we would be seeing many Americans, perhaps millions of Americans, missing out on their paychecks. And so the FDIC went ahead and guaranteed those deposits. However, SVB is not the only bank who made this unfortunate and strategic error in banking. We obviously have heard of Signature Bank, and they made similar problems. So the systemic issue there is that whole 1.9 to 6% issue with the bonds. And so now the Fed has basically guaranteed, the Fed is the one who sells the bonds, has basically said that they will make whole right now, temporarily, any bank who needs to sell their treasury bonds in order to raise capital, in order to basically be able to provide the deposits that people had deposited in. And so these two effects have so far thus successfully staved off any more bank runs or any more contagion. There are several factors that went into this. And the main one, though, is the 2018 tax law, the Trump tax law that basically helped deregulate banks. In particular, not big banks, but medium sized banks. Because ever since Dodd Frank was passed in the aftermath of the financial crisis in order to stop these kinds of things, Republicans and moderate Democrats, along with an organization called No Labels, have done everything in their power in order to reverse them. Because if there's nothing more American than unchecked greed, it's unchecked greed. So what we have here is a situation in which we are, although not as taxpayers, because the FDIC is run off of bank fees, essentially. Banks have to pay for this insurance deposit. We are going to still suffer the consequences of this because the Fed is still making people whole, and the Fed is something that we pay for amorphously in the grand sense of the fact that we each contribute to the GDP of our country, which gives the Fed the ability to make more money without causing runaway inflation.
And what are the consequences going to be for regular people of the Fed's actions?
The consequence is going to be relatively little in your everyday life. What will likely happen, though, is that the Fed is probably going to stop being as aggressive in their interest rate raising, because part of the problem is that when inflation started going, because we spent a lot of money during COVID, the Fed reacted very quickly and some would say, in an extreme manner to raise the rates very quickly. And that particular problem, along with the fact that they were deregulated and didn't have to have the same stress tests that commercial banks, your JP Morgan, your Chase, your Wells Fargo, your Bank of America, they didn't have to follow those same rules. And so as soon as you loosen those capital requirements and what you could take as a deposit and what you can invest in with that deposit, we got bank collapses. It's almost like we never learn our lesson. And while Dodd-Frank wasn't perfect, and certainly it could have been more efficient in the way that it helped regulate banks, it was keeping this from happening. And so, yeah, now it's not. And this is the consequences. And it could have been a lot worse if the Fed and the FDIC and the Biden administration hadn't stepped in the way that they did. And to be very clear, this is not a bailout. There is no bank bailout here. This is not like 2008. In 2008, we made the banks whole and provided liquidity and cash to keep them functioning. In this particular case, the bank is gone. It is not coming back. It is already under receivership of the FDIC and the Fed. And so what we are, if anything is being bailed out, it's actually just the depositors getting their money back.
Yeah, that's definitely a relief for sure. And I'll tell our audience at home that I'm so happy that Craig's on here talking about financial institutions, all that stuff, because I literally learned everything I know, like in my personal life, about like a stock account, a Roth IRA from Craig, because Craig and I have worked together for a few years now, and he has like coached me through all of that. So I definitely trust him on as a source on this topic for sure. And I'm so happy you joined us today to talk about this a little bit. Linda, do you feel like, so Craig mentioned that these effects are not likely to be felt in our everyday lives, but are there any kind of ripple effects of this that like you'd want to identify, like for our audience at home? Like, do you think that there's any sort of maybe unforeseen consequences in the future? What this could mean just like in the political scene as well? Like, how are we seeing the messaging on this play out?
Yeah, so I think that we don't know all the full consequences yet. We've certainly seen a lot more instability in the stock market over the last few days. And as we did see during the Great Recession, like if that instability were to increase, then it really could have consequences for regular people. But of course, we're all hoping that it doesn't happen. Beyond that, maybe there will be some good long-term consequences if this actually spurs Congress to take action and to reinstate some of those regulations that were weakened and maybe even create some new ones. And I'm wondering, Craig, what do you think that learning our lesson in this case and making changes would look like, and how likely do you think that it is to happen?
Well, I think right now in this Congress, the likelihood that they're going to fix this is zero because it's a divided Congress. And even in a divided Congress, there are Democrats who voted with Republicans or should I say, former Democrats who voted with Republicans to repeal this in the first place, because that's the only way it got done. It does, like you say, have the opportunity to do the contagion aspect, but really only mid-sized regional banks were destabilized, and large commercial banks, which were the problem, and investment banks, which were the problem in the first crash of 2008, still have to go through regularly strenuous stress tests to make sure that they are capable of handling the kind of traditional bank run that happened to SVB. But because SVB had much looser regulations, because they were a mid-sized regional bank, they were not. It is also a weird confluence of events, because it really did happen because a bunch of VC advisors were skiing in Montana, and at this resort, they all had some herd mentality happen, and they told all of their clients to pull their deposits. So if you look in the month of December, or basically since November, you can see billions of dollars being withdrawn from the bank all at once, which is particularly dangerous to banks, and not in general how they operate. Usually you have a percentage of inflow outflow that is a fraction of the total deposits, but if everybody's coming from your deposits, you have a real problem.
And so, Craig, what do you think about these executives behind this as part of Silicon Valley Bank? Maybe those executives are part of the people that were like hitting up the slopes in Montana, which is so terrifying to think about, that they're just like on vacation and they can make something like this just happen at the drop of a hat. What do you think is the accountability piece behind this for them? Like, come on, we got to see something.
2008 led to the worst financial disaster since the Great Depression, and not a single banker went to jail. So nothing's going to happen.
Joyous.
Because we live in America, and we are apparently not very interested in holding those people who damage our lives every single day to account. We are more interested in letting them
lose their jobs.
I mean, they're going to lose their jobs in the sense that, like, the bank doesn't exist anymore, but they're not going to lose their jobs in the sense that they're not just going to be able to find some other bank or some other board or some other institution to get on. These people are all about being extremely wealthy, and once you reach a certain level of wealth, you are immune from consequences, apparently, in America.
Yeah, and I have a feeling they're not going to miss their monthly paychecks or yearly salary or whatever if they are to have to lose their job over this. Like, these people are so financially secure that they can gamble like this with the livelihood of the American people, and, as you said, face no consequences.
Also, if you notice that many of the executives sold their stock in the bank in the last 2 months. And so because they were likely paid in stock in the first place and not by a salary, they literally don't care. They probably are making just as much money as they were before, just off of the interest that their stocks are giving them, the dividends from their stocks.
Well, that's...
And so really what we should ask ourselves is, like, why are there politicians and organizations out there doing this when they knew full well that this is the outcome? That's my question.
And I think that's going to take us right into our next topic here, which is Kyrsten Sinema, the former Democrat in Arizona, and the role that she's playing within all of this.
And the Democratic vote that allowed for that bill to pass.
Okay, there we go. So, Linda, do you want to talk a little bit about what Kyrsten Sinema is up to, senator from Arizona in the Senate?
Sure. So this has to do with a group called No Labels, which claims to be a bipartisan movement of people who are fed up with both parties and want an independent candidate. But the truth is that No Labels is claimed to represent some kind of middle American voter, a swing voter, is complete nonsense. One of their main policy stances, one that happens to be shared by Kyrsten Sinema, is that we should cut Social Security and Medicare. And that's incredibly unpopular with voters, Democrats, Republicans, and independents alike. And so that really just shows that No Labels represents a bunch of bored Wall Street billionaires. It doesn't represent any regular people, the people who are actually going to rely on Social Security and Medicare to retire. And so No Labels has been working to gather signatures to get a No Labels candidate on the ballot for the next presidential election. And they've actually managed to get enough signatures to qualify to put a candidate on the ballot in Arizona. And what the rumor is that they're going to try to use it to potentially get Kyrsten Sinema on the ballot to play spoiler for President Biden and help a Republican win.
Yeah. Basically, it's not just Arizona. They're in like 11 states now where they've officially registered for the ballot. And because registering for a ballot just requires signatures, which, if people don't know, is actually just a money game. If you have enough people knocking enough doors, you can essentially just farm enough signatures. And they have plenty of money because they're primarily funded by rich Republican billionaires or multimillionaire donors. And so what you have here is a kind of dark arts political operation that sounds good, no labels, bipartisanship, let's get at the partisan rancor, but really is just a dark horse Republican operation in order to undermine many of the financial guardrails that we've erected today and to attack many of the institutions and programs that everyday Americans rely on. Because it's not just Social Security and Medicare. They would happily go after food stamps. They'd happily go after subsidized childcare. They would happily go after universal pre-K in states. They really want that libertarian lifestyle. And so no labels is a very false moniker, but they use it in order to convince people that they are this alternative and to basically prevent spoiler. Because American politics works as a first past the post system, which basically means that the person, you need to get 51% basically, or a plurality depending on the state laws. And if you can drive enough votes away from your own particular candidate to create a plurality for another party, you've easily just defeated the Democrat or the Republican in this case. It doesn't really matter, but mainly they're interested in being spoilers for Democrats. You basically just siphoned away votes from them. And so instead of having a actually representative democracy, what you get is a bunch of people who vote for no labels because they think it sounds good, but don't understand that by voting for them, they are essentially ruining the chances of someone who would be their strong second preference to win. And this is why ranked choice voting is so important, is because it eliminates that possibility, which is why you see Alaska and Maine in particular moderating, because they have ranked choice voting, which allows for this kind of spoiler tactics to be ineffective.
Now, I have a theory that no labels is a socially acceptable way for Wall Street billionaires to support Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis becoming the next president without saying that that's what they're doing. Because I do feel like support for Trump in particular, it's not, a very popular thing to do. It's, say, a Manhattan cocktail party. If you're the head of a business that relies on public support, if you say, I support Donald Trump for president and I'm giving him money, you might see a lot of people boycotting your business. But if you just say, hey, I believe in bipartisanship and both parties stink, so I'm going to support independent, no labels candidate Kyrsten Sinema for president, then you're really just helping DeSantis or Trump win the White House, but you're not putting that out there in public and suffering the consequences.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think the three of us could all think of a few labels for this no labels group. One of them being just like extreme, like this extremist group that is trying to be a spoiler in the presidential, Senate elections. I think this episode really covered some really important topics. Like, it's the Silicon Valley Bank, what that means for these larger financial institutions, then how that relates to these candidates like Senator Kyrsten Sinema, how it relates to what their hand is in the national political scheme. And of course, all about power within the billionaire class of America, the elected officials, all that good stuff, not so good stuff that is definitely has an unfair share of power. That's what I was trying to say. Awesome. Well, is there anything else you want to touch on in this episode before we wrap things up, Craig or Linda?
Oftentimes, the reason for why something happens is extremely complex, and sometimes we, as a society, perhaps denigrate conspiracy theorists a little too much, because if you start looking at this kind of thing, you're like, weird. I can't believe there's this group who's not popularly supported by any majority of Americans, drastically influencing our policy and to the point where millions of Americans' next paycheck could have been threatened. That's always fun.
Yeah, that's always fun / not so fun. All right. Well, if that's it, I think we're going to wrap things up for this episode of Progress America Unfiltered. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe. We want to hear what your thoughts are down below. If there's a topic you want to hear us cover on the show, you put that in the comments. We will for sure respond to them. We will for sure, well, hopefully make a video about them too. Some really good topics coming up. Some really good shows coming up. Stay tuned for more. And thanks so much to Craig and Linda for joining and for you for watching. All right, everybody, have a great day. Bye-bye.